financially carry you guys through fights because, sometimes you do see that, the fighter is the breadwinner, which, sounds nice, but like you just laid out, what if they get injured and they can't fight for however long? Where's that money going to come from? Or let's say they have a fight and they're, nothing happens. They're ready for another fight, but there is no other fight. Or like you said, their opponent gets injured. Where's that money going to come from? So, it seems so simple for everyone to figure out that they need to be paid more, but anytime it's brought up, obviously to Dana White, the person in charge, he says that they're paid properly, and he just kind of, shoves it under the rug, and it's like, you can't keep shoving it under the rug because then you just got a lumpy rug, and why would you want to do that? Like, just face the problem head on, fix it, and then go from there because you'll have more people wanting to fight for you, and that helps your promotion. Like, one of the biggest problems UFC had for the longest time was, we had Pride, we had UFC. Pride went under, and then most of those guys came over to the UFC, and then you got all these dream fights. Well, there was that one name that never came over, and his name is Fedor Emelianenko. Fedor never came to UFC, never proved himself against the world-class fighters of the UFC, whether it be because he wanted to also co-promote, and UFC is not going to co-promote anything, or if it was something where they couldn't agree financially on what was going to happen. It just didn't happen. So now we have an issue with Francis Ngannou. He was the UFC heavyweight champion. He never lost it. He left because he wanted to be paid more. He wanted to be, now that we're hearing what's going on with other companies that they've met with Francis, he wants to be, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for all the other fighters. He wants everyone to be paid more. He wants everyone to have that health insurance, and he wants everyone to have a voice at the table because people don't go to a UFC fight to look at an octagon cage. They go there for what happens inside that octagon cage, and that happens to be two fighters going at it, going to war, and figuring out who is the best fighter. So if you are running a circus and your talent wants to be paid more, pay them more so that they stay there and are continuing to be your talent that people come see. So it's, it seems like a no-brainer for us, but, at the end of the day, it really is a no-brainer. And I don't know, I'm not going to defend what Dana White's doing or what any other promoter is doing at the end of the day, not paying the fighters what they need to.
Yeah. So it's so funny because, like I said before, Francis Ngannou is not worried about money. It's not,
yeah.
Money is not, I don't think money is a factor for a lot of people, but he's become champion. He can literally do so many different things in terms of, do appearances, world-class seminars, he can do so many different things. He can decide to take a bunch of his money and open a bunch of wing stops and just fade into the shadows and fade into the shadows and collect his money and never have to say a thing ever again. But he's talking. And so now, have you heard that recently they've been talking about Francis Ngannou asking for promotions to give that they're not allowed to give the fighter under this amount. So even the fighters that he fights, he wants them to make a certain amount. He doesn't want them to make under the amount. So for example, if Conor McGregor said, look, you guys give me $30 million, $20 million, whatever that outrageous number is for the fight. Make sure this guy makes at least $2 to $3 million, please. It's I might just be a big name, but I think people threw shade and none of these guys want him because he's asking for a ridiculous amount of money. I was no, he's actually asking money for you.
Yeah.
So you see you hear the talk about money so often. For example, like Sean O'Malley, he played it smart. You know, he's a talented fighter, but he only had a handful of fights, and he brought in a lot of eyes. And at some point, he's like, I don't want to fight top 5 guys if I'm making this kind of money. Like,
Right.
I'll just sit here. So I was like, he's not wrong. It's like, why would I go ahead and say, like, why would he go ahead and jump the line to go fight somebody like at the time, it could have been Peter Yan. Like, he only had he was maybe 3 fights deep, and he was like, oh, you know, he's talking so much junk, give him Peter Yan. It's like, why would I fight Peter Yan for 15-15? You know? Like, you don't need to fight a killer for such small money, you know? We know there's a lot of guys that are ahead of the rankings. Pay him what the other people in the rankings are getting paid. Get rid of the contract, renegotiate, make that happen.
Yeah. Again, it seems like a no-brainer, and they, you know, the fact that they're dragging their feet is just really unfortunate with the whole deal. And I mean, we're seeing, like, you know, the writer's strike happening right now as we're recording this, and, you know.
There's a writer's strike?
Oh, yeah, there's a writer's strike going on right now. So I think a lot of TV shows, movies are going to be affected in a big way.
Ooh.
Although,
so
you know,
is it like, are we talking about like what type of writers? Are we talking about like for like screenwriting
yeah, screenwriting. Yeah. Not reporting. Reporters, you know, you can't really go on strike if you're a reporter because you are work for yourself for the most part, unless you work for a website or whatever, or whatever news source. So yeah, those writers are probably never going to go on strike. But yeah, no, it's the Screen Actors Guild. Those writers are going on strike right now.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, which it's an interesting time for them to do that as well, because we have AI starting to bubble up and become a bigger and, depending on who you're talking to, more dangerous thing, where you may not need a writer if you can have a computer just write you a script and tell it what to write, and gave it this kind of guidance. So, I mean, it's a very interesting time for writers to have done that, but they do obviously need to be paid better. You know, I mean, it's the same situation. It's roughly the same situation when it comes to fighters, that, you know, it's pay, it's quality of life, it's what is happening insurance wise, and, you know, just the perks that come with being in that position as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even know that there was a writer's strike, but all those, you know, at some point, you know, everybody has to be compensated for their time. So,
yeah.
And it just, there's so many different quotes and things like that. And you hear about the Pablo Picasso and how fast he did a drawing, but people want to, it's like, oh, why don't you pay me less? You know, it's like, or they say, why don't you, why are you charging me so much? It's like, you're not paying for that. You're paying for the experience that I've acquired over the years, you know? So everybody needs to be compensated for not just their time that they've given right there and then, but all their time they've acquired over the years trying to perfect their craft, you know?
Yeah.
So
like, I think
regardless if you're a writer, if you're a fighter.
Right. Or, you know, I'll quote a rock star here. Alice Cooper said that, you know, the ticket prices or whatever the venue's paying the artist, they're not paying them for that 2 hours it takes them to perform. They're paying them for all the time it takes to get to that place so that they can perform.
Exactly. Mhm.
Yeah.
That's so true. So true.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you do have a family and you do have kids. When it comes to balance, how do you kind of, you know, no one really fully masters balancing time and efforts when it comes to different things. How have you kind of maybe gotten better over the years when it comes to balancing work, life? Because, you know, I imagine you get probably texts and stuff from, you know, at all times of the day. And so how do you kind of just learn to turn it off and then, focus on where you are and being present?
Well, before it was a lot harder, much, much harder. But now currently I don't really belong to a gym, so
Okay.
I don't get it as much. I do get, questions. Like recently when I came back from this last fight, I've been getting, all types of questions from all over the place, literally all over the place. But, in terms of balance, it's just kind of, I've been lucky. My wife is, I would have to say my wife is definitely the breadwinner here, and she's a go-getter. This, this wasn't necessarily a dream of mine, but then things started to pick up, and I started making decent money when I started cornering guys like Cowboy Cerrone and working with guys like John Jones and Carlos Condit. And, so I didn't have to, it's not like a 9-to-5 job. So I spent more time with my kids anyway. So, and my first two children were like gym babies. And yeah, they were super gym kids. And I actually still have an issue with one of these, these photographers. I have a picture of my son being held by like, there's like Derek Brunson and Holly Holm and I think Timur Aliyev, who was in the UFC at one point, and he fought in WSOF, and all these killers, and so they always, that same dynamic and community that you get, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you're gonna get that at MMA gyms too. Like not everybody is out there a killer. Like one of my fighters, Patchy Mix, he used to. So when I first met him, he didn't have a ton of money and stuff like that, but I knew he was a good investment. And one of the things that he would do is I would put my son or my daughter to just chill out. And what he would do is I would do a private session with him, or before then, he would watch my kid while I did a private session with another fighter. And then, that fighter would go ahead and watch my kid while I did a session with him. So they would alternate. And so I didn't have to, overextend myself. And I'm grateful that my fighters saw value in me and I saw value in them. So we always had a great trade-off, at one time it was kind of, I was teaching classes and somebody would say, "Oh, I'm not doing anything. I'll watch your kids," and when I would go home, my wife would just be coming back and we'd chill at home, give or take, with kids. It's hard to go out with them. So I made food at home and on the weekends we hung out, and after a long training camp, we'd go on vacation, maybe take off for a couple of days. And, during the summer, give or take, if these guys had fights or not, I would look at my schedule and we'd disappear somewhere. I have a sister-in-law in Texas, or, we'd take off back home to New York, so things were, in my opinion, they were kind of balanced because I don't need much, but, we're still working around that. There's still kinks in the whole thing.
I mean, no one fully perfects balance, because there's always going to be one thing that we talk about it, how life will kind of throw curveballs at you. And so, you might have your day perfectly planned out, and then literally within the first 15 minutes of your day, something could mess it up to where your entire day is just then completely in shambles and you got to redo everything. So, it is always, it's its own martial art, is the balance of time, personal time, professional time, family time, all of that. So, it's good that you still see that there are still chinks in the armor and nothing's perfect about it.
No, there's absolutely nothing perfect about it. I mean,